Welcome to everyone. Happy Wednesday lunch. It'll take a little bit for folks to come in through the Zoom portal. We'll give it a little bit of time. So excited to have everyone here this afternoon. We have a presentation that I've been looking forward to since we started planning it a couple of months ago. Dr. Alex Kalof will be speaking about living and leading from the heart, a discussion about core values, which are so essential. I want to welcome everyone back to the Gender Equity Education Series for Fall 2022. Our group has been working diligently to put together a series of presentations over the last several months, and our topic for the fall is confident communication and expression. So we're very excited to bring you some interesting sessions. Also, happy Women in Medicine Month, which is September. So it's a great month to honor all of our female colleagues. I'm going to pass the virtual mic off to Dean Page for a second to let him provide some words, and then we'll get going. Dean Page.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doherty. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say hello, welcome, and thanks. I didn't realize this is Women in Medicine Month. I think that's wonderful. The only other announcement I would mention is Rebecca Oslickson started September 1st as the chair of the Department of Anesthesiology. She is the first tenured member of that faculty in its history. So far, the Department of Anesthesiology, 100% of its tenured faculty are women and full professors. Let's see if we can keep that up. In the meantime, I did just want to acknowledge and thank the Gender Equity Steering Committee and Ann Doherty in her role as Director of Gender Equity within the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This Gender Equity Education Series is something I look forward to and appreciate the opportunity to attend each time. I'll get out of your way, Dr. Doherty, but did just want to say hello and thanks and appreciate everybody who's listening in person and those who will listen in the future. Have a good day, and I look forward to listening and learning myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean Page. Always happy to have support from leadership, and happy to have Dr. Alexson join us on faculty. Like I said, the topic for the fall is confident communication and expression, and we have some exciting offerings from Dr. Kalof's talk today on core values. She will also be co-facilitating small group workshops, and we're going to put the dates and times in the chat for you in a second. To build on the discussion from today. This will be small group RSVP workshops. So we'll give you more information and look out for an email coming up shortly to sign up for that. In October, we're going to be talking about narrative writing as a tool for reflection. And then in November, I'm very excited. We have Penny Eckhart, Dr. Penny Eckhart, Professor Emerita of Linguistics from Stanford, who's going to talk to us about the evolution of language and the role it plays with gender and race in terms of othering and policing of language. And I think it's going to be fascinating. A couple of other housekeeping things. One is this session is being recorded and will go on the video library on the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion's website. Give us a couple of days to put that up, but please let your colleagues know who weren't able to attend today that it is recorded. Also, we are requesting nominations for the Executive Leadership in Academic Medicine Program, ELAM. The self-nominations are due September 15th. There was an email that was sent out earlier this week, or you can get in touch with me for more information. ELAM also, this is a really exciting development. ELAM has now a sort of sister program, Executive Leadership in Healthcare, which is designed to foster women leaders on the hospital administration side, and Dr. Jason Sanders and the leadership of the medical group have offered to support a nomination of a woman faculty for that program as well. So we'll send an email about that process in just probably this week. So be on the lookout. Great programs, and so happy that our institution is supporting folks to join those kind of professional development activities. The one final thing is that the Women in Medicine and Science Peer Leadership Group is winding up its first year. This is a cohort-based program that meets once a month for women from all ranks and all departments and roles across our college. It's a great place to network with like-minded individuals and also talk about leadership skills and leadership opportunities. So look out for an announcement for the next iteration, which will likely start in November. So without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Alex Kalof, who is a professor of pathology and laboratory medicine. She's the division chief of surgical pathology. She's an alum of the Lerner College of Medicine, as am I. And I had the privilege of participating in the Women in Medicine and Science Peer Leadership Group with Dr. Kalof this past year, where she did a presentation for us on values and how values can help guide decision-making. And it was so inspiring that we decided we needed to get this out to more folks. So I pass the virtual mic off now to Dr. Kalof, and I would ask that people use the chat for questions, and we will have a period of Q&A at the end. So Dr. Kalof, welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think this is almost more for me than for you. It was a very cathartic experience. And I'll share a little bit about why. I'm going to see if I can share screen. Are you all seeing my?
Not yet.
Not yet. Nope, that's screen 2. Yes, sure. Okay, is that good? And you can see that? All right. I want to make sure I see my slides over here. Yes, perfect. Okay. So I'm over here in the medical school, which is so fun because I haven't been back here, and I actually got lost just like I did back in the day. So it's fun to be back, and I'm grateful to be talking to you about something I'm extremely passionate about. And the title of this talk has morphed a little bit based on some very exciting cooperation and collaboration with Erin Kinnart, who is an internal leadership coach at UVMMC and a certified somatic coach from the Strassi Institute. So we are able to, and I had really wanted to merge these two concepts of, values and doing a personal core value inventory and stepping you through that process, and then talking about embodiment, somatic practices, and using those to really be able to embody your values. And what does that look like? And that's where the workshops will focus, but we'll touch a little bit on what I'm talking about in a moment. So living and leading from the heart, I think, I am my best self, my most authentic self, and my best leading comes from when I am authentically speaking from my heart. So again, near and dear. So I have nothing to disclose. Our objectives for both this talk and the workshops really is to understand core value constructs. There's just, a little bit of research I'll present. I want to dive, hopefully deep into our own personal core values. We don't have a lot of time for that. So a lot of that's going to be sort of homework after this. And then, truly, you're going to be doing this, maybe for the rest of your life. I mean, this is a very iterative process and a living document, essentially. We want to experience how somatic practices can help us live these values every day and take purposeful action towards what matters to us the most. And then really acknowledging and understanding the importance of holistic integration of mind, body, and spirit. And I think there has been a lot more push, maybe supported by research, to really say that this somatic awareness can really help in aligning personal, professional, and societal values. So our workshop sessions will include small group breakouts and guided sessions with Erin, with dialogue with peers, reflections on self, and then hopefully developing a new awareness and applying the learning from today. So just as a start, I was surprised, although not surprised, after indecision or decision fatigue at the end of every day, it feels. Do you know that the average adult makes approximately 35,000 decisions a day? I think something like 300 are based on food. So quite a few decisions made. And so thinking about what guides our decisions, and we obviously know there's small decisions and there are big decisions, but I think knowing where those decisions come from, very important. What I'm going to present today is my opinion. I think that, and those of researchers actually, that many of our important decisions are guided by our values. And when you think about values, I like to think of them as a rail system that was built early on in our lives that essentially doesn't change. Our clarity on our values changes, but the rail system doesn't. And I think there are external forces that help to form that railway system. And I'll be using that analogy throughout. And just understanding, there can be good effects, and there can be some potential negative effects of that external force on our rail system. So values, what does that mean? Values defined the principles or moral standards of a person or social groups. We're going to focus on person, the generally accepted or personally held judgment of what is valuable and important in life. And I think that's a nice definition. So on the right, you can see that this is a beautiful, clean railway. And, if you consider this our life, there might be some rain, but there's something to look forward to and a direction. And that becomes, our rail system. Personal core values is a set of feelings or beliefs that guides our actions and influences our behavior. So, this is, again, something you discover, not something you choose. And I think it's important to acknowledge, too, that while this is a very clean, clear-cut path, a lot of times it looks like this. This was my rail system before I actually started to understand my own core values. And that didn't happen until I was doing some leadership coaching in my mid-career. Mid-40s. And it came at a perfect time in my life where I needed to really be very crystal clear about what I wanted to do, what was important to me. So I think our job is to gain the awareness and really attempt to try to clean off the rails and understand what our values are. So getting to know ourselves, it seems somewhat simple, right? But what is simple is not always easy. So again, something you discover, and it may take time, it may change a little bit, that clarity, but ultimately will serve us all well. So I pulled out some quotes that I thought were interesting, and I know Ben Carson has been, may not agree with his political views. I think that he has written a lot on core values and argues, as I think I will, that the value system is essential, knowing yourself, basically so that you understand the risks that are worth taking and the risks that are worth avoiding. And you can see he's written a book for teens. And I think that actually starting these sorts of discussions at a younger age would really help, I know I wish I had been introduced earlier to the concept. I love this one by Elvis Presley, because I think this is so true and kind of sums it all up. Values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you have them, that you leave them all over everything you do. And I think that's something that really is a concept that is just perfectly stated there. And I think it also underscores the diversity and the fact that a value system, whether it's your own or you're understanding someone else's value system, actually really helps honor the diversity among us, honor the differences and the individuality of each of us. And so that has been very inspiring to me. Now, this was a funny quote that I pulled recently. I had a friend that I was talking to about this talk, and her immediate response was, but Alex, not that I don't think you could do this, but why did they ask you if you're a pathologist? And so this is someone I went to medical school with. She's in psychiatry. She's a good friend. And I kind of chuckled, and it made me think, okay, well, I probably need some qualifiers. Let's think about this. Why am I so passionate about this? Why do I talk and incorporate this value exercise into my mentoring, into my any leadership opportunity that I have to incorporate it? I will do that. So it was a nice reflection. And just to say, this is kind of, I'm telling my story to a certain extent, and in relation to value systems. So it gets a little personal. I hope that, hopefully that'll resonate with some, see, it's a path, right? I'm just kind of telling a story. So I was able to go to the AAMC Mid-Career Women Faculty Professional Development Seminar. And that, in addition to the Mentoring the Mentor program at UVM, this embodied leadership training that was offered 2 years ago through organizational development across at the medical center was really transformative for me, because it really did link two things that I thought were essential. I mean, I've been in my head a lot, right? I'm a pathologist. I work through, my job is to look for patterns, connect the dots, right? And it's very hard for me to drop out of my head and into my heart, right? Because we are so cerebral. And the training and practice, continued practice, really, really helped me understand some of those kind of triggered responses, some of the pulls throughout the day that just potentially derail you, right? And so the goal being, not that you're going to be perfectly in line all day, but that, through the practices and you get some derailing happening, you can pull yourself back to center, right? So that's the embodiment piece through the somatic awareness. So that was very impactful for me. And probably the most impactful, just based on the core value piece, was the Brandeis Sea Change Mentoring and Leadership Institute that I went to in 2018. That was the first time I ever even attempted values, learned about values, and that wasn't too long ago. So that was extremely eye-opening. So through my leadership positions, mostly I have an operational focus through section medical directors and division chief of anatomic pathology. And of course, on-the-job training as a mom, reading lots and lots of books about how to care for young women and trying to be a good human out there in the world. So those are some qualifiers. And then I thought it was funny, I was thinking back. Here's my, the Brandeis book that they gave the fellows. And then to the left, this is a shirt I still have from a leadership conference in 1986. So I show this and interact the future, right? So this is a lot about connection and enhancing connection between people and, honoring the differences, but, understanding how we can connect to each other. So in 1986, the rails were forming for me. So I was in, I think, 9th grade at the time. Oops, hold on. So another qualifier for me are my family members. And as I was working on this talk, I kind of nudged my mom and my stepdad, who are both full professors and sociologists, said, hey, I'm doing this thing on values. Do you have anything to add? Some quotes maybe. Well, they did have a lot to add. And I have to say, it was inspiring. And I, was incredibly moved, because when you look at the work that they have done, it is incredibly impactful and very close to the value systems, looking at personal core values aligning with societal values, and how they inform political policy with respect to gender and environment, and with climate change choices. So, I just pulling out some of their more recent articles, activating values for encouraging pro-environmental behavior. I mean, these are all extremely important concepts that reach all of the nooks and crannies of our life, and very important issues. Also bringing values and deliberation to science communication. This is my stepfather, Thomas Dietz. And I think that, the fact that this sort of had eluded me all these years, but obviously was integrated into my fabric, right? I mean, I think that I realized, and just the way we talked and the things we talked about, that this was also important to me. And then this was co-authored by my mother and my stepfather, about gender values and environmentalism, and looking at the gender differences between the values and being altruistic versus self-reflective. So I can't leave out my baby brother. And so my brother is a full professor at University of Arizona. I did not ever understand what he did. He actually was a mathematician that got a PhD in UC Davis in transportation. And so I was excited to hear that he is an expert on homophily. And homophily is the tendency of people to seek out or be attracted to those that are similar to themselves. And so thinking about this inclusive piece, right, and thinking about these dangerous echo chambers, right, that we gravitate to the people with like ideas instead of diversifying and opening up perspectives. So I was really proud to see that he's publishing on very important work on collaboration, and essentially looking at how homophily works and affects the policy networks. So Tom, my stepfather, actually gave me his draft of a book that he's writing that's going to be published through Oxford Press. He basically is writing on facts and values, decisions for sustainability. So we were lucky enough to have a dedication here too. And so I think that it was very timely. It's just, as so many things happen, it's just so coincidental and fun. But here, talking about the values and the beliefs and the norms, and then, how they relate to science and decisions and policy, extremely important to understand. And so from his work, actually, this is what I'm presenting, just as far as the science behind it, the value groupings, and this is based a lot on Schwartz as well. He's also a sociologist that has done a lot of work on this. Basically, the basics saying values shape our preferences. They are more general than the specific preferences we use in making a decision. But there are 4 key values that emerge, and 2 are polar opposites. So looking at altruism versus self-interest values, and then the traditionalism or conservative versus an openness to change, moving forward and changing. And so I think that while most of us hold all of these values to a certain extent with different things, it's important to understand what matters, which values are most important to a person. So values are the guide of kind of clues to look for, the first step in the chain of decision making for when we do make a decision. And so how is this choice related to preserving traditions, for instance, enhancing my personal well-being? That would fall into self-interest. Providing a new experience for me, that would be openness to change. Or is it altruistic and taking care of others and the environment? So I think these decisions are all around us. They're every day. They can be small. An example he uses is choosing an apple, right? You might choose an organic apple based on an altruistic, feeling of caring for the environment. And then the personal effect of that, the personal value of cost, taste, and is it healthy for me, right? So those are the personal self-interest values. So every decision has a component of these. This is what he argues. Is the classic Schwartz block system that talks about basically the same thing, the self-enhancement, conservation, so moving from a personal focus to a societal focus, and that we can truly have anxiety-based values and prevention of loss versus the anxiety-free and promotion of gain. So almost this like scarcity and abundance frames mindset that we talk about a lot, but they are all interconnected. And then Tom said, well, maybe you should talk a little bit about John Dewey. And I was very grateful to have learned more because I'm frankly slightly embarrassed I didn't know more about John Dewey. He is actually the only American philosopher who's been featured on a US postage stamp. This is one of the signs outside of his childhood home on Willard Street. So he was born and raised in Burlington, Vermont, and he is perhaps one of Vermont's most influential natives. He graduated from UVM. He actually started at the age of 15. If story is correct, he actually was turned down for a graduate program at UVM, but was accepted at Johns Hopkins University and graduated in 1882. So while Dewey's greatest contributions are in education, and his ideas have essentially revolutionized how we teach and how we understand the role between teacher and student, he has had influence in nearly every field. I didn't even realize he was one of the founding members of the ACLU and the NAACP, as well as helping to establish the American Federation of Teachers, the second largest educational union in the US. So just really phenomenal efforts and powerful philosophy and concepts. And he's written a tremendous amount in a lot of different arenas. He also established the New School for Social Research in New York City that would go on to attract in 1933 a lot of the European intellectuals that were fleeing from the fascism at the time. So he does have his ashes buried right at the Ira Allen Chapel. And the quote here, I think, is beautiful and very appropriate for what we're talking about today, is focusing on values, essentially. So the things in civilization most prized are not of ourselves. They exist by grace of the doings and sufferings of others in the continuous human community in which we are all a link. So again, that connection piece. Ours is the responsibility of conserving, transmitting, rectifying, and expanding the heritage of values we have received, that those who come after us may receive it more solid and secure, more widely accessible, and more generously shared than we have received it. So making the world a better place, right, through our values. So Dewey argued that values were how we resolve conflicts among our preferences. So basically values drive our preferences. And importantly, he was one that emphasized the fundamental link between values and identity. So he was pragmatic, right? I mean, we can talk about ideals and we can talk about, all the different ways we can learn to converse about these ideals, but we really do have to have a product, right? We have to move forward. So he wanted to evaluate ideas in terms of their consequences and usefulness, since getting to absolutes and ideals is difficult at best. So core values, essentially the compass that we use to navigate those preferences when they are in conflict. And I think that is probably the best way to say it, right? I mean, our values, if we are forced to make a decision, falling back on values to make that is really important. And then there are ethics of decision making. So, there might be a lot of reasonable criteria for a good decision. And since so many people differ in their perspectives, he said that the ethical way to make a decision is via fair and competent deliberation or dialogue, right? Enhancing dialogue among interested and impacted parties. So basically, the importance of communication in the development and transmission of shared community values, and consequently, the democratic process. So I find it very interesting too that a lot of the work on values, these lists of words, that resonate with you, is very similar to that nonviolent communication. The lists that come through as far as identifying how does that make me feel, right? What are my needs? And then what am I going to ask of someone if we are in conflict? So we have a rail system, very simple here, very clean. Maybe we've done our work and we've really clarified what our value is and where we're headed. I think that it's important to understand that it's not as simple. We have a lot of different sets of values. They can be grouped. There's themes. They intersect with others. So it's a complicated process, a very exciting one, but it does take time. And then this is a roundhouse, of the railroads. Then you're talking about multiple people coming in and intersecting to your value system, your rail system, and understanding how you're going to relate and have a dialogue about their values. So very relational. So here's the how-to, right? So you want to, maybe, I don't know how many folks on the call have already worked on their values. I think that, maybe I'm surprised that medicine is maybe a little bit behind on this discussion. I think there are a lot of companies out there, a lot of businesses that do, institutional values, what's our company values. I think, it was new to me. So I will fully acknowledge that this is something that, there's a lot of research and energy put into this. I'm certainly, not presenting anything new, but just basically how it relates to medicine and leadership and my own personal growth. So step one, as far as discovering your values, is self-reflection. And it's important to start with a beginner's mindset, right? So getting rid of all those, I should have, I could have, I'm expected to, all of that, and try to really get down to what potentially matters most to you. And then you can read through a list of values, and you want to see what resonates, what words resonate to you. Think about moments in your life that bring you joy, were especially meaningful. Who were you with? What were you doing? Or alternatively, you can think about the opposite. You can think about a stressful situation where you're very frustrated. How did that go? And who were you with? And why didn't it work? Why didn't it feel good to you? So those are the sort of things to think about as you're working through these lists of words, right, that represent potential values for you, and then write them down. So I'm hoping people have a piece of paper or a Post-it note. Ideally, Post-it notes are great, and a pen, because in a couple minutes, I'm going to give you just a little time to look through those and just generate just a start of what words resonate with you, the values that resonate with you. So then the next step is to consolidate, right? So you want to identify themes. So let's say you have 10 Post-it notes with different words on them. You're going to identify themes. You're going to group them essentially. One of my examples is loyalty, commitment, and honesty equals integrity, right? I think that loyalty, trust might be even a better word for that. So you can consolidate into one word to represent that value. Then identify principal core values and really try to choose only 3. So reading from a list of values, what resonates, then you want to rank them, right? So you want to rank your principal core values, pick the one that actually is the most important to you. And then you wait a few days and then you kind of see how that feels, as you're working through your day, you kind of revisit that values. Hey, what sort of actions are in alignment with that value? And does that still feel personal and unique to your identity? Or maybe you're going to change it and cross it out and pick something else. That's a very natural thing to do. The thing to be careful of, though, as you're doing this, we have a lot of external forces in our lives, right? We have a lot of expectation, whether it's our own expectation of ourselves or someone who loves us, or someone we're working with. And it's really important to dig deep and try to be agnostic to those expectations. So be mindful of those suppressed values as well, things that you think that you've suppressed because it wouldn't have been acceptable in society. Suppress or try not to think about external influences on your own personal values, and question, is something that I feel or something that I think I should be expected to feel. And for me, it's interesting because family was one of them. Everybody's like, family, boom, that's my value. And I'm a mother. I'm thinking, gosh, what am I, a terrible person because I'm not putting family down. But it's different. There's something that makes family important to me. Family didn't resonate, so I had to figure out why was family important to me, or there was something deeper and more translatable across a lot of other different things in my job, the way I relate to my parents, the way I relate to a partner or friends. So here was my first go at the Brandeis. I wanted like 15 words, and it's actually fine if you have that many, because you're going to group them and you're going to consolidate, and you're going to say, oh no, that doesn't feel right. Loyalty, I crossed out and put trust. I think that felt a lot better to me. And then you can kind of circle things, and again, the grouping helps a lot. So this is kind of what I'm hoping you can do, even in just 5 minutes here, but it's a fun practice. Now, what about values and leadership? This is from Brene Brown, Dare to Lead. She believes strongly, as I do, that daring leaders who live into their values are never silent about hard things. It gives you strength, it gives you resilience to, as she says, lead us to the arena door. So doing something uncomfortable and daring because of our beliefs, it's really something that, because it aligns with our values, it gives us strength to get through some really difficult conversations, difficult times. So, and a nice quote from her. So clarity is really important on these. I mean, these you shouldn't even have to think about them, right? So it comes with clarity that our intentions, works, thoughts, and behaviors align with these beliefs. So the inventory, important that we can't live into our values, we can't name. We don't have multiple sets of values, right? We don't have personal values and then our professional lives have another set of values, right? These don't shift based on context. They are our core values. And we know that when there's conflict between our own values and those of an organization or of a family or social structure, there's stress. And that's where the embodiment comes in. How do you sense that stress? How do you inform your head? How does your body inform your head that there is a mismatch here? There's a malalignment and there needs to be some change. And so I think that's a really important concept. So picking 1 or 2, max 3. Of course, Jim Collins always says, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have no priorities. So we do have to reduce the number. And again, they should be so crystal clear in your minds and so precise that they don't even feel like a choice. As you read them, you should feel a deep resonance of self-identification. And then again, resist holding on to words that you think you should feel strongly about, that you've been coached to be beholden to, basically, and haven't felt true to you. And then ask yourself, does this define me? Is this who I am at my best? And is this the filter that I use to make hard decisions? So operationalizing your values. So how do you take that into the world? How do you use them to make decisions? You have to learn about what are some of the early warning signs that you're living outside of your values. Brene Brown always points to resentment. When resentment starts bubbling up, that's when she knows there's something amiss as far as a misalignment with values. And then living into your 2 key values shape the way, this is a question, how do they shape the way you give and receive feedback, right? And I think that's really helpful too, to understand the person you're giving feedback to, what are their values? Because you're going to want to kind of focus on those. You need to understand that because, you know, that might even inform their performance, right? And make a little sense if you're working through some challenging areas. So again, you can take one value and you can ask these 3 questions. What are the 3 behaviors that support that value? What are the 3 behaviors that you're doing that are outside of that value? And then what's an example of a time that you were fully living into that value? And I would venture that those are the times we're feeling truly joyful. So again, these are just catchphrases. Brene Brown uses catchphrases so that we can remember them easily. She talks about be brave, courageous is an important value for her. And that means clear boundaries, leaning into difficult conversations, and talking to people, not about them. So that's from Brene. And then her stewardship, you serve the work, is very important as well. And that, you know, you're responsible for the energy that you bring into situations. So really saying, okay, this is my value. How do I show up with this value at work, right? And how could I potentially be misaligned with that value? How can I change that, energy and those actions? Okay, so here's the point where if you have a piece of paper, I'm just going to stop for about 3 minutes or so. I'd love for you to just pick whatever resonates with you and write it down, because this is something you can take home with you, think about, and reflect on for the workshop if you choose to do it. So I'm going to start the clock now. Yeah, and Deborah, I completely agree. I think living into a value, it can also make you feel scared from taking a risk because of living that value. Yeah, absolutely. You won't always feel that initial joy. Sometimes it's a painful process. It's usually pretty quick. You're going to feel okay about that pain, right? Because you're aligned with your values. You're going to be willing to suffer, I guess, more. You don't have to start grouping now, but I imagine you're probably starting to think about them. And I will show you an example of my core values that I kind of snuck additional values in based on the fact that I consolidated a theme that represented to me a lot of different things. But you don't want to necessarily do that now. Just really write down what speaks to you. Yeah, good point. And living the value allows you to feel that discomfort and not run from it. Lean into it. time I look at this list, I see something new, but usually it does relate to one of mine that I've chosen, or maybe further clarifies that maybe I wasn't entirely correct on what I picked. Again, it's an iterative process. Right, so we're winding down. It doesn't give you a lot of time, but we're going to have a lot of time to self-reflect in between this talk and the workshops if you choose to do that. And certainly I'm always open to talking to people about values. So I would love any opportunity if folks have questions after the talk. So let's move on to the embodiment piece. What does that mean? What does embodiment and somatic learning and leading, how do you use that to lead? I think it basically comes down to just because you know better does not mean that you will do better. So basically embodiment is anything that you're kind of doing without thinking, right? Like you're on autopilot, right? And most of us know when we're stressed or we are frustrated, we can go into that autopilot and not necessarily be in alignment with our values. So kind of talking about, let's say you have to make a left turn. You have to make a left turn, your prefrontal cortex is telling you to take a left turn, but you take a right turn. And why is that? So we are all shaped through our lives to get certain needs met. And this is need for safety, belonging, and dignity. Neural pathways, that old saying, neurons that fire together, wire together, they are strong and they are hard to remodel. But essentially this work remodels these pathways. The conditioned tendencies are those that the actions that we repeat over and over and over in order to ensure safety and belonging. Essentially, what I like to think is wearing a rut in the brain that we just kind of go into right when stress hits. It's the path of least resistance, right? So that's where we go. So our conditioned tendencies have served us, and that's something Erin says a lot. Erin Kennard, these have served us. We should honor them. But really, if it's not in line with our values, let's try to be more aware and see how we can shift. Now, we're going to talk about the body, the intelligent body. A lot of this is taken from the Straussy Institute concept of the head, the heart, and the gut brain. But even just our brain has three components. We know the neocortex being the rational thinking brain, the limbic system being that emotional fight or flight or feeling brain, and then the reptilian brain for physiologic processes. So we all know that, and we all, I'm sure, have experienced going limbic. This is what I call it at home, going limbic. You're either turtling up and pulling away, or you're becoming the pterodactyl basically, and you're pushing out, and you are becoming aggressive. Those are sort of the limbic responses, those conditioned tendencies. So the intelligent body that has three functional brains, the head brain, and this is actually supported by research, the heart brain and the gut brain, and they can actually operate independently. They found that certain gut microbes can actually regulate the hormone of cortisol and the neurotransmitter serotonin in the belly. So there are signals that are actually getting sent from the belly, the stomach, to the brain. So it's not all top down anymore as far as that concept. We're actually learning that there is some bottom up. And I think it's really the time to start feeling that and incorporating that into our day-to-day. So off the rails, what happens when you go limbic? You essentially are off the rails, right? So you've lost connection with your values. And it's just important it's going to happen. And it's just important to learn, how do you recenter? How do you get back to basics? Importance of shaping and framing. So understanding what are the influences of our values, and starting with the individual at the core, right? And then you're influenced by family, community, institution, social norms, and landscape. And I think that, as it's like, throwing a stone into the water, the largest ripple is going to be the hardest for us to see. right? Maybe the hardest for us to feel, maybe the most that we feel, if it's religion, faith, whatever that is. And I think that just acknowledging that these frames are here, I think is extremely important. They can have positive effects and they can have negative effects. So sites of shaping, and this is Aaron, these are Aaron's words, and I'm very grateful to him for his wisdom. Basically, the influences and experiences that have helped to form who and how we are today, our strengths, our moods, our narratives, and what is challenging for us. So by reflecting on this and understanding how we've been shaped, we can become more aware of our conditioning, develop greater compassion and understanding, reinterpret the past, and open new commitments about our future. So we are rewiring based on our heart and our body senses, our somatic awareness. So centered to humans is the need for survival, safety, belonging, and dignity. So unfortunately, this is not equally valued in most societies, and that creates problems. But we can work on it. These sites form our conditioned tendencies, and this work can really shape our resilience. So this is where, I get a little personal, because I think it's important, because I'm trying to see if we can provide an example for you to do the same thing. So I took my gender persona as a woman, and my career persona as an MD pathologist, and I kind of put, what is the individual, family, community, what are the influences on me? Well, I'm a mom as an individual. As a family, I'm a daughter, a sister, and an aunt. This was 10 years ago, and at that time, couples and friends were having babies at the same time. I was married, having a family. What were social norms at that time for me? The white picket fence, the Volvo, and the driveway, and then the landscape being for me, the spirit being support and validation as a working mother, and some faith as well. Now, it's separate, and it's sad that it needs to be separate. Ideally, these would be integrated. And the individual being a doctor, the intimate network, my colleagues in the department, community, UVMMC, institution, University of Vermont, social norms, kind of what is a doctor on call, professionalism, and then landscape, the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. I mean, I was just kind of like brainstorming here. So it might not fit yours. It's probably not even perfect for me, but I wanted to start with something. So then you think about what happens when there is an event, a loss, something is destroyed. And for me, this was a divorce. It was a very traumatic experience for me in mid-career to have the basically dissolution of my family. And so what it did was it forced me, and this is really how it felt. It felt super intense and felt like the world was just falling apart. It forced me to get down to basics. And I love this quote from Pema Chandran: only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible in us be found. I think those are our values. And I think this experience, this loss, helped me identify those values and get clearer on those values. Frankly, I hadn't even thought about the values. And maybe that's why I got to this point. Maybe I had the head down, doing what I thought I should be doing. And, to a certain extent, because I wasn't really aware of my values, I had sort of lost what was important to me and what I was longing for. So I think there was a lot of growth after that event. And so, not that I want, or I don't think you have to go through such a loss, of a family member or a friend or a career or whatever it is. If we are starting with awareness, maybe we don't have to lose anything ideally, but through these lived experiences, if they're truly lived and experienced in all ways, mind and body, we can find deep resilience and clarity around what we want and who we want to be. And I think that's really, the basics there. My values that came out of this, radical acceptance is a huge one. So the strength that comes from accepting what we cannot control, right? I couldn't control the loss of a marriage, embracing uncertainty, and understanding that there's impermanence of all things. And I had a hard time coming to terms with that. But now it has given me a lot of strength and resilience. Appreciation is something that I think has developed for me as a clear value. Diversity, it lends itself to diversity of people, opinions, and perspectives, inclusion, looking for the goodness in all individuals, and taking joy in small things. Again, that impermanence, right? It's linked to that impermanence, and potentially previously what my need was really stability. But you could argue maybe that changed. The values aren't supposed to change. So I think it's actually more of a relational thing. Authenticity, a big one for me, being able to communicate openly and honestly to support trust and integrity. And I think that is related to connection and connecting with people in an authentic way. So it takes work, it takes daily practice to cultivate this. And sometimes when our values are in conflict with our needs at the time, it becomes difficult. Embodying and honoring our own values actually honors individuality. And I love the quote, all perspectives are true and incomplete, right? So we have to respect others' perspectives. Now, the power of presence as far as leadership, the Straussy Institute of Embodied Leadership is what Aaron Kennard hooked into and brought to UVMMC. They see leadership presence as inherently relational. It has a quality that can be learned and embodied. Again, embodied being, that's just something that you do, that's the wiring of your body. The guided practices on centering, increased somatic awareness, and understanding your own energy and the energy of others that they're bringing throughout the day is extremely important in that guiding practice. And then how do you show up? How do you show up every day with a regulated nervous system, right? And you might be, off center. You might, just learning how to come back to center is part of the practice. So I'm going to start with a relational story, and we're getting close to the end. Relational story of misalignment, and this is where our train tracks diverge, right? And this is a personal story. This is related to my father. Who was a very engaged grandfather, and lots of time with the kids, very important. He's a mathematician and physician and loved to teach the kids. And he was a huge center of our world. Right now, this is my work. So with the political landscape, our ideals have completely diverged, and it's causing a lot of conflict. I received a certified letter in the mail basically saying he didn't want to be estranged, but would not be able to communicate with me. And, I think this was just very recently, about a month ago, and I don't have any answers, but I'm going to fall back on my values, and I'm going to fall back on trying to understand his values to try to see if we can come to some sort of alignment so that we can really just acknowledge what we share. So homework, self-reflection, think about these questions. What do you care about? Who do you care about? And what do you long for? And look for, write it down. How does that overlay with the values, the words that you just picked out in day-to-day life? How are you living those values? And when you see that you're not, offer yourself some compassion. It's normal, and we all veer off the tracks often, daily, probably, and stay curious, because that's how it's going to become clearer to you. So the workshops and guided practice that we're offering is co-facilitated by Aaron, who will be the lead in the embodiment practices and a certified somatic coach. We're going to do it the 26th from 10 to 12. That'll be the introduction to the personal values inventory and the practices. And then the 18th, about a month later, we're going to explore alignment of values through somatic practices. And identifying, framing, personal framing, and we can do some breakouts and work with our peers on that. So certainly our goals are to make sure that people are feeling centered under pressure, that they're able to live a healthy work-life balance, manage conflict. It hits a lot of areas, cultivate resilience, and most importantly, live in choice. And leave you with a poem. I love this poem, and it just basically talks about how, and you can read it here, but how, nothing we do is complete. We're actually planting seeds, watching them grow. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in that. And I am running out of time, so I think I'm gonna look at the chat. Yep, I'm running out of time. So if you have any questions, please bring them to the workshop. I'd love to talk to you about it, about your values. Even if you're not part of the workshop, email me and we can set up some time. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was a wonderful teaser to get everyone ready for some deep digging into values and embodied leadership. I'm so glad you were able to present today. We are running low on time, so I just want to say a few thank yous to folks, especially to Alex for coming and joining us, and to Erin Kinnard who for offering to co-facilitate the workshops. Also, as always, to Tiffany Delaney for her expertise in herding cats and keeping us organized. I also want to thank Rachel, who did our closed captioning today. Thank you so much. And then Joe Conant, Leanne Holterman, Jen Hall, and Molly Berry, and Eileen Chakosky-Kelly, who make up the Education and Professional Development Working Group from our Gender Equity Steering Committee, who put together all of these wonderful sessions. So thank you so much. Remember, it's recorded. It will be on the ODEI website under video library. So check it out and pass it along to friends, and then email me and look for another announcement about the workshops, but space is limited. So please email me to reserve a spot. And with that, I think we'll let everyone go back to the rest of their days. Have a wonderful day. It's beautiful and sunny outside. So enjoy some of that. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much.